This video audits the tunnel behind Abraham Lincoln at Mount Rushmore and stress tests the official Hall of Records story. The official line says the passage was the start of a grand archive that died for lack of money and the start of a world war. But the first hard check is simple. A rough 70-foot tunnel was blasted first, fast, and where no tourist would ever stand. Which makes no sense if a proud, visible hall was the real goal. Look, if the showcase was the face-side art, why was the first spend the most hidden and least photogenic cut? Measure first. Reality does not care. Why does a project sold as an art shrine begin by paying for a hidden hole that delivers zero visitor value? The stated plan describes an 80 by 100-foot chamber inside the mountain, yet the work we can see is just a crude passage hammered straight into granite. So do the simplest check. If a cathedral-like room was the target, you lay out, square, and start shaping a broad volume, not a tight access corridor that screams utility. Think. Any builder knows the first moves reveal. The true priority. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why does the physical start point match a service tunnel and not the footprint of a grand room? The same plans call for an 800-foot staircase carved into the living face of the granite, leading up to a 20 by 14-foot entrance. But a constraint bite is obvious. Cutting that many stone treads by hand in the 1930s on a mountain wall would soak years of skilled labor and money before a single tourist even reached an inner door. Be honest, that scope alone would drag the schedule and bleed the budget before the haul even began. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why would a team already stretched on the faces choose a side feature whose stonework could rival or exceed the main job in time and cost? The check is tactile. Stand on any long urban staircase, like the one at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and count how your legs burn halfway up. Then think of the Spanish Steps in Rome, and multiply their reach by more than 5. Except now you are not stacking blocks on level ground. You are carving risers out of a cold cliff with drills and hammers in thin air. Look, that is not a flourish. That is a second monument. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why sell a plan that doubles the lift without a revenue stream to fund it when the faces are still raw? In the 1930s, hard rock steps in granite meant hand drilling, plugging, feathering, and careful featherline breaks with only limited blast shots. So the speed check is ugly. Tread after tread needs level, grade, and pitch control to keep water off and feet safe. And any missed cut multiplies into rework and risk. Stop buying it. This is not an add-on. It is a full build with a crew that must be housed, fed, and paid over long winters. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Where is the documented space in time and money for a years-long carve that produces no face progress while burning the same hands and steel? The plan also shows custom cast glass doors topped by a 38-foot bronze eagle above the entrance. And the feasibility check is blunt. In the 1930s, the kind of pour, mold, and finishing for a bronze that tall lives in major industrial hubs, not on a mountain ridge. So you first need a coast-scale foundry order, then pattern work, then a risk-heavy shipment. Look, paper drawings are cheap. Casting is not. Measure first. Reality does not care. Where are the work orders, shop plans, shipping specs, and lift calculations for a 4-story bronze if this was ever more than ink? Assume that Eagle could be made. The next bottleneck is moving it. The rail leg would need a long, flat car and secure cradles, then a heavy truck for rough roads, then a climb to the site with grades, curves, frost heaves, and drop-offs, then a rig tall and stiff enough to swing a huge piece into mountain wind. Be honest, every link from furnace to cliff face is a failure point waiting to win. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Why does a plan with that many weak links get green-lit when the supposed core job still needs every dollar and day? Now pivot to what was actually cut. Between 1938 and 1939, crews blasted a rough, straight, 70-foot tunnel into the granite, and then stopped. And the check is operational. You do not assign your best blasters and burn powder on a side corridor unless that work is locked in by money and schedule. Because once you start a hole, you own the safety and the mess. Think. That is not a sketch. That is loud, tracked work. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why spend 2 seasons of heavy excavation on a hallway you are willing to abandon if the art job is truly starved? The shutdown timing gets sold as fate. Borglum dies in 1941, and war looms. But the basic causality test cuts both ways, because if your quiet aim is a secure access point, then a 70-foot bite into granite is a tidy first phase, and a global crisis is a perfect public reason to quit while the hard, obvious work is done. Look, once the entrance exists, you can seal your noise and shift the rest out of sight. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why frame a clean, deep starter cut as tragedy when it fits? A complete first milestone for a different goal. The stone tells a style split that begs a shop floor check. The faces are refined, staged, and finished for light, shadow, and expression, while the tunnel is proudly described as rough, which any hand can spot as fast, coarse drilling and heavy shots aimed at one thing: forward footage. Be honest, this looks like a mine drift, not a portico. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Why would a supposed grand entrance open with tool marks that scream utility corridor instead of care, polish, and showpiece detail? Any crew juggling both art carving and hard rock excavation chooses different tools, rhythms, and spacing, and the tool mark audit is straightforward. Facework uses patterned holes, tight charges, and pneumatic trim to coax shape, while a service tunnel just wants a safe round that eats rock. Look, the crew proved they could do museum-grade cuts, yet for the hall approach, they dropped to brute force. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why pick the sledge approach for the first 70 feet of a temple if the first impression is meant to sing? There is a cover aspect that any practitioner sees when rubble starts piling up. Carving those 60-foot faces meant a steady river of broken granite leaving the site day after day for 14 years. So the check is this. Mix a few extra loads from an inside blast into that flow, and no outsider can tag each stone to its hole. Think, dust is dust in a dump. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why not tuck an inside drive behind the daily thunder of the public job if a second task needs to hide in plain sight? Noise and motion also hide things. Regular shots on the outside mask echoes from the inside, and busy roads, hoists, and airlines let odd moves blend in. So the operations check is simple. If every day is loud and busy, a few off-pattern shots and odd carts draw zero attention. Be honest, the shield stands for you. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Did the art serve the engineering as a smokescreen, not the other way around? The site choice is sold on geology, the quality of Harney Peak granite, and yes, strong stone helps big carvings, but the access check bites harder. The Black Hills in the 1930s were far from easy lines of supply, so every drill, hose, stick of powder and meal had to be dragged up new roads in thin traffic and harsh weather. Look, remote equals control. Measure first, reality does not care. Why pay the pain price of isolation unless privacy and gatekeeping were part of the brief? If the only aim was a showpiece for visitors, a site with good rock and simpler access would save money and time right away. But the secrecy check says the opposite. Distance is a feature if you do not want drop-ins, snapping cameras, and nosy eyes. Be honest, the fewer passers-by, the tighter your circle. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why pretend isolation is only about stone when it so neatly filters who can see what, when, and how often? Skip ahead to 1998, and the tunnel that sat for 57 years suddenly gets a box of porcelain panels in a teakwood case, put into a titanium vault, and sealed behind a 1,200-pound granite slab. And the scale check is comic. A giant rock-hard corridor gets capped to hold a small story kit right at the lip. Look, that is a plug, not an open door. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why use a mountain-grade stopper to guard a small keepsake unless the goal is closure, not visits? The fit test is even harsher. A titanium vault is a choice you make for hostile time and harsh chemistry, not a sentimental nod. And a granite cap that heavy is a go-away sign, not a welcome mat. So the design telegraphs lock, not share. Be honest. If you wanted reading, you build a room with a door and hinges. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why build a fortress foyer to store a shoebox, unless the box is a decoy that excuses the seal? The material choice flags intent. Teak resists rot. Porcelain enamel shrugs off weather, and titanium laughs at corrosion. So the durability check shouts, permanent, not ceremonial. Look, this is overkill for a token time capsule, but it is right on brand for a seal meant to last. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Who signs off on aerospace-grade metal for a hallway display, if not for a permanent barrier with a story pasted on top? The timing check nags. The tunnel sits idle from 1941 to 1998, with no fuss. Then, out of nowhere, comes a formal seal with rare metal and a half-ton plug. And any investigator hears the click. The long, quiet, followed by a final lock, is a classic pattern of decommission or concealment. Think, if nothing hid there, why the rush to bolt it forever? Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why bury a dead idea after half a century with the most final, expensive closure yet? The official frame keeps saying the hall is unfinished, but the word test matters. A job can be unfinished in public aims, yet complete in private aims. And the check is this. If the hidden goal was a secure access, a 70-foot drive is a crisp, stable first plate to rest on and wait. Be honest. Failure does not look this square. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why insist on tragedy when the cut we can touch stands like a clean, useful asset? The physical state is not collapse, not blowout, not flood. It is a sound, rough tunnel, halted by choice. And the safety check says stopping means you still spend to make it stable and safe. So a quit call is never free. It is a managed shutdown. Look, random failures leave mess, not tidy stops. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why pay to end clean unless the achieved piece was good enough to keep as is? Now to the paper. The National Park Service shows drawings of the 800-foot stair, the giant eagle, the glass doors, and a grand room. But the document check is simple. Art renders can be candy, while real work hides in dull notes or off-books plans. Be honest. The ink that dazzles often lures your eyes away from the cut that matters. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Which speaks louder, the pretty sheet or the granite hole you can put your hand on? When the storytellers control which papers you see, the only honest test is material against material. And here, the material that exists is a rough 70-foot tunnel, not a gallery with carved cornices and a lit staircase. So the marketing check fails. One is stone, the other is a sketch. Look, shop guys trust what a hammer can ding, not what paint can dream up. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why believe the drawing over the dust, when the dust is the only thing that cost blood and time? On Gutzon Borglum, the public story paints him as a grand artist with boundless ambition, and that sells the scale and the odd calls. But the motive check asks for more than one axis. A driven patriot could carry a dual brief, sell art in daylight, secure what matters in the dark. Be honest. Big personality doubles as perfect cover. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Is it more likely he misjudged every hard limit, or that he fronted the art while someone else counted the hidden wins? On the workforce, we know hundreds of adults worked those slopes over 14 years. Many with hard rock chops, and the human factor check says you cannot hide a task from every hand. So you do the next best thing. Give them a story that fits the daily moves, faces, stairs, hall, glory, and they will repeat it because it feels true in their hands. Look, cover stories thrive when they match the sweat. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Does a strong myth about a hall explain the tunnel better than a weak memo about a side hole ever would? The core split is not subtle. On one side sits a meticulous public plan for a glowing hall with impossible ornaments. On the other sits a rough, direct, 70-foot service cut that quits at a clean stop right when a world crisis gives perfect pretext. And the contradiction check is hard steel. Paper wants beauty. Rock screams function. Be honest, one of these is fiction. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Which version survives impact with logistics? The storybook or the shaft? Now run a resource audit on what the faces and the tunnel took. Drill steel, powder, hoses, air, hands, and time poured into those 60-foot faces. Over 14 years, plus the months of shots to make the 70-foot drive, and the management check balks. No crew burns prime gear on a side play without locked money, unless they plan to own that result. Look, chaos is a lie we tell when the truth has a lock on it. Measure first. Reality does not care. How does the official line make those leaders both sharp enough to stage stone art and dumb enough to waste seasons on a dead-end hole? The porcelain panels, set in 1998, tell the monument's story for future civilizations. But the design check screams mismatch. A story wants access, light, and air, while a titanium box behind a granite plug wants the opposite: silence and denial. Be honest. A book belongs on a shelf, not in a safe sealed in rock. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why write a tale and then weld the library door shut? The language of final state matters. There is no half wall, half stair, or half vault here that hints at a faltering hall. There is a finished entry drive into granite that ends by choice and later gets a deliberate seal. And the state check says, this is not limping art. It is concluded access. Look, tidy closures are rare in real failure. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why does every material sign point to a wrapped deliverable instead of a fumbled dream? The official line claims the hall would protect documents from weathering, but the threat test is off by orders of intent. Rain and wind do not require a 70-foot tunnel and an 80 by 100-foot room buried in hard rock, while bombs and fire do. Be honest. The scale of the shelter tells you the fear behind it. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Why build bunker-grade stonework for drizzle when a dry room would do if paper was all you feared? The 800-foot stair, in turn, is absurd on its own terms when money is tight. The cost-benefit check is brutal because stairs do nothing until the hall exists, and the hall cannot be shown until the stairs are in, creating a cash trap where the access eats the budget before the core is built. Look, any builder smells that cul-de-sac from the first step. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why draft the most expensive path to a room that has no proof of life beyond drawings? The 38-foot eagle over custom glass doors in more theater than function, and the survivability check says giant bronze and glass on a cliff take wind, ice, and lightning year after year. Which is nonsense for an entrance meant to stay stable. Be honest, that combo is perfect for a brochure and terrible for a mountain. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why crown a cliff hole with a fragile showpiece if the innards were meant to store what matters? The tunnel's rough interior speaks to speed and the goal to gain depth, and the tooling check reads like a ledger. Large rounds, quick mucking, minimal trim, and simple support where needed to move forward. Look, that is how you make an access, not a vestibule. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why not ease the first 70 feet if welcome was the intention rather than through? The shutdown right after Borglum's death and on the eve of war is sold as bad luck, but the motive check admits how neat it is. A public leader gone, a nation turning outward, and a site that no one will question closing, all while the loud, high-visibility digging has already achieved a quiet deliverable. Be honest. That is perfect cover. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Why would real chaos line up so cleanly with a tidy off-ramp for a hidden goal? The unfinished label is a story device, not an engineering state. And the punch list check sees no half-done finish carpentry, no staged arch springs, no begun stair run. Instead, there is a blunt line bored in and left to sit, then locked. Look, that is finish on a different scoreboard. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why grade this as failure when every sign reads Phase 1 complete, hold for later? Even the 1998 seal ceremony reads like theatre over closure, and the ritual check notes the mismatch between pomp outside and dead stop inside, as if bright words had to distract from a plug that says, "Do not enter," in granite. Be honest. Pageantry is a great way to keep eyes on the plaque and off the path. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why stage a tribute that doubles as a do not open tag if the only thing inside is empty rock? The geologic praise for Harney Peak granite is a half-truth that passes the scratch test. Yes, good stone helps, but the isolation advantage stays after the faces are done, which fits a site that wants to disappear from day-to-day life. Look, silent sites age better. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why marry perfect carving rock with perfect privacy if you only care about photo angles and bus turnout lanes? If the plan's ornaments were real, there would be a trace, lift points, transport sketches, anchor layouts, and temporary staging footprints etched in the approach zone. Yet the visible outcome is only a rough tunnel. The evidence check is cruel to fantasy. Mount hardware leaves scars, while drawings leave none. Be honest. Scars talk. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Where are the marks that prove a giant bird and glass door ever had a shot? The labor story of 2 years on the tunnel makes one more point on scheduling truth. No smart foreman front-loads a side job with explosives when the money is uncertain. So the planning check suggests that the tunnel work was not side at all, but part of the must-do path. Look, the loudest, riskiest moves do not get guesswork. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why treat the noisiest, most traceable task as a casual fling if the purse strings were that tight? The long dormancy before the seal suggests no casual trespass or decay inside, or alarms would have sounded sooner. And the maintenance check says if a hole is a hazard, you fence and watch it, not dress it once and forget it. Yet the heavy ceremony came late and final. Be honest. That cadence smells like a final lock, not running safety. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why wait half a lifetime to cap a harmless void, unless the timing served another aim? The public plan's grandeur reads like a magician's flourish, fingers spread to the sky, while the other hand palms the coin. And the misdirection check is to track the rough work, not the rhetoric, because the rough work leaves dust trails.
Bent steel and spent caps. Look, all the romance in the world cannot outvote granite. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why believe the flourish when the palm is the only thing that left a mark?
The claim that the hall would guard paper from weather fails the design logic check, because any dry, reinforced room near ground with a decent door does that, while a mountain tunnel is exactly what you build when your threat model is force, heat, or shock. Be honest. If the use case was rain, the response is absurd. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Why does a simple mead get a bunker answer unless the stated need is fiction? Even if we give every benefit of the doubt to ambition, the finance check drags us back. Stairs that long, doors that fancy, an eagle that big, and a hall that huge are budget eaters that do not earn back on sightlines or ticket counts, while the faces do. Look, smart money feeds the thing that draws crowds first. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why starve the draw to feed the garnish, unless the garnish was not the point? The tunnels fit in the mountain is a material fact that does not waver under any story swap. And the endurance check says a cut like that sits tight if left alone. Which is exactly how it sat until it got sealed. Be honest. Stable assets wait well. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why pretend a steady, functional whole is the corpse of a fantasy rather than the spine of a quiet plan? When a narrative needs you to accept incompetence at epic scale from people who carved living rock into faces with care and method, the credibility check fails. Those hands did not forget how to count or stage. Look, the same minds do not turn to mush on Tuesday for a hallway after crafting eyes on Monday. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? Why hang the gap on oops when skill was proven in the same air by the same people? The tale of glory, sealed in 1998 with porcelain texts, invites awe. But the access check kills it. No one is meant to read what sits behind a plug that heavy without a major pry, which means the audience for that message is zero for as long as that cap holds. Be honest. That is a vault, not a visitor center. Do the simplest check. What breaks first? Why write a letter to the future and then brick over the mailbox? The bronze eagle fantasy also fails the environment check, because wind and ice on a ridge play rough with tall, thin parts and seams, and glass doors take grit and frost that grind joints, which together looks impossible in practice for a stable, long-life entry. Look, this is set dressing, not mountain craft. Measure first. Reality does not care. Why does a plan pick fragile flash for the roughest spot on site, unless it is fiction? Every time the official story leans on romance, artist vision, grand stairs, a chamber of history, the ground truth check points back to the same thing. A blunt, deep, stable tunnel that does not match the vibe of a gallery and does match the vibe of access. Be honest. The stone says what the paper will not. Count the steps. You cannot cheat constraints. Why keep reciting the brochure when the cut in the mountain argues the other way with every inch?
So here is the verdict that the checks force.
the official explanation fails the audit because it cannot explain why the first and only built piece is a rough 70-foot access tunnel, why the most expensive, least visible work got done first, why the plan leans on absurd ornaments, why the site's isolation pairs so well with secrecy, and why the final act was a permanent seal under a story plaque. Look, the facts do not back the tale. Follow the rubble. Who benefits? If the public plan truly drove choices, why does every material choice look like a hidden job finished to phase and then put to sleep? Hypothesis. The tunnel was phase 1 of a secure, hidden facility, and the grand Hall of Records was a cover story. The faces gave public noise and dust to mask the inside work, while the tunnel provided controlled access into strong granite. The later titanium vault and granite plug served to close, not open, the path once the inside aims were met. If you want more calm, hard checks on big stories like this, subscribe for more breakdowns.